Political campaigns love micro-targeting. That's sending messages directly to small groups of voters. If you're not in the group being targeted, you may never see them. Let's look at what you're missing. Here are some recent political ads that were micro-targeted to Muslim voters in the swing state of Michigan.
Vice President Harris has chosen a side, her right side. Harris has made herself clear. She stands with Israel and the Jewish people.
And joining Kamala will be her husband and top advisor, Doug Emhoff, who would be the first Jewish presidential spouse ever.
Kamala relies on her husband, Doug, for counsel on the toughest issues, like Israel's noble fight against the radical terrorists in Gaza. And when Doug talks, Kamala listens. Kamala and Doug, America's pro-Israel power couple.
That went to Muslim swing voters. Now, that's extremely cynical and I think kind of anti-Semitic, like there's a Jewish puppet behind the woman. Okay, that's one set of micro-targeted ads to Muslim voters. Now, here are some other ads run by the same pro-Trump PAC being targeted to Jewish voters in the swing state of Pennsylvania.
Two-faced Kamala Harris is secretly campaigning for Palestine and trying to get away with it.
In Jewish communities throughout America, questions are being asked. Why is she running ads pandering to Palestine? We must stand up to anti-Semitism. We say no more.
Kamala Harris, stop pandering to Palestine and stand with our ally Israel.
Wait, we were just told Kamala Harris stands with Israel, that she's super pro-Israel. She's part of a pro-Israel power couple. Now we're being told she stands with Palestine against Israel. You see the issue here, right? Those two sets of ads can't both be true. They're diametrically opposed and mutually exclusive, but they're both made by the same pro-Trump political action committee to micro-target and manipulate vastly different groups of voters. It is the grossest, most cynical ploy I've seen in an election cycle that's rotten with cynical ploys. And it's all made possible by the world's richest man, Elon Musk, who has given $75 million to the super PAC that's bankrolling all of those micro-targeting campaigns. Musk is just one of three billionaires, three people total, 1, 2, 3, who taken together have poured $220 million into efforts to elect Donald Trump. But Musk is unique and uniquely dangerous because, remember, he bought the website formerly known as Twitter. He made it an absolute vector of disinformation and neo-Nazi bigotry, which he sometimes personally reposts and interacts with, all in the name ostensibly of free speech. But of course, this free speech warrior is now banning reporters and blocking links to news the Trump campaign doesn't like, multiple sources tell the New York Times. And now the tech tycoon is offering $100 to any registered voter in Pennsylvania who signs onto his petition in support of the First and Second Amendments. Critics say Musk's scheme doesn't quite break the many laws that forbid bribing voters, but it sure does bend them pretty hard. And then yesterday, the SpaceX owner hit the campaign trail himself, just outside of Philadelphia. He offered up a heaping helping of election denial.
A lot of people on the Dem side will say there's no cheating, and I'm like, you've made it impossible to actually prove that there's cheating. But statistically, there are some very strange things that happen that are statistically incredibly unlikely. So, you know, there's always this sort of question of, like, say, the Dominion voting machines. It is weird that I think they're used in Philadelphia and in Maricopa County, but not in a lot of other places. Doesn't that seem like a heck of a coincidence?
Okay. Few things here. Everything Musk said there about Dominion voting machines is just flatly untrue, as the company pointed out in a statement yesterday. And as we all learned last year when, let's remember, Fox News had to pay Dominion $788 million to settle a defamation lawsuit after repeating Trump's lies about the voting machine company. Trump also used his rally to bond with fellow paranoid conspiracy believers.
Do you think there is a shadow government behind the Biden-Harris administration?
I mean, well, let me put it this way. It's not Biden.
Well, who is it that's behind him? We know Obama, okay, but Obama...
I mean, I'm just as curious as you are. You know, it is as far as I can determine, there isn't any one sort of puppet master. It's more like there's 1,000 or, I don't know, a lot. But it's just obvious that Biden's not in charge. It's obvious that Kamala's not in charge. I mean, Kamala's, they just replaced the Biden puppet with the Kamala puppet. very obviously. So, I think it's not, from what I can tell, it's not one puppet master, it's many, but, interesting to see the crossover between the Epstein client list and Kamala's puppet masters.
Okay, a few things here. One, it's not a shadow government, it's the actual government. Like, they're just, Biden's the president, Kamala Harris is vice president. That's the government. Number two, okay, I will give him this. The man is a supernova of charisma. I mean, just an incredible stage presence. And finally, it's pretty unnerving that the richest man in the world is just casually suggesting that there's some unseen puppet masters who control our government and hung out with Jeffrey Epstein. That's a little loud even for a dog whistle. This level of cynical, brain rot political programming out of one of America's confirmed top elites, a globalist himself who's from another country, is pretty much unprecedented. I mean, sure, you had Henry Ford palling around with fascists back in the 1920s and 30s and publishing absolute filth, anti-Semitic bilge. But Musk has wealth and access that Ford can only dream of. The richest man in the world has become a raving reactionary, and he's partnering with Donald Trump, the guy who wants to overthrow American democracy. And Musk is doing everything in his power to get that guy elected, from bankrolling lies to reposting racist conspiracy theories to even working a stage in his own absolutely unbearably awkward way. What exactly is Musk expecting in return? Teddy Schleifer is a New York Times reporter covering campaign finance and the influence of billionaires in American politics. He's covered Elon Musk's role in this election at length, and he joins me now. Teddy, your reporting on this has been great. Before we even get to Musk, I just want to start with just noting, this came to my attention, I think this is something you noted, that Miriam Adelson, who's Sheldon Adelson's widow, Rick Uihlein, who's a sort of manufacturing industrialist in the Midwest, and Musk, just the three of them putting up $220 million, is that right?
Yeah, and that's just in the third quarter of this year. And that's just what we know about. We don't know about kind of any contributions that were made to dark money organizations. Look, Democrats have billionaires too, but I do feel like the Republican billionaires, it's a very concentrated group of people. And part of that is because of the guy leading the Republican ticket. You know, there are plenty of wealthy, center-right, pro-Israel, tax cuts Republican wealthy people. They are obviously not the primary audience at a Trump rally. And so the types of people who are donors who have rallied around Donald Trump, it's a peculiar bunch. It's people like Miriam Adelson who have one issue they really care about, or it's people like Elon Musk who just kind of want to be in the room.
And the Elon Musk thing, I mean, again, American history is long, and we've gone through really interesting periods, sort of famously in the late 19th century. There was no campaign finance regulation, really. In fact, lots of it came about because of how blatantly corrupt the relationships would be between robber barons and politicians, essentially sponsorship. It's just hard to find something quite like the precedent here of the richest man in the entire country fully, completely behind one of the major party nominees to the point that Musk is.
Sure. I mean, I was at that event you showed yesterday outside of Philadelphia, and I was sitting there wondering, why is this event happening? Clearly Elon is there, in purpose to encourage people to register to vote in Pennsylvania. That's the state that he really cares the most about. He's basically moved his operations there. The voter registration deadline is Monday. So the one way to think about why he's there is because he's trying to kind of create an earned media moment, right? Get people to show up, get people to cover it. I'm sure some folks registered to vote because of that event.
No, he's campaigning.
Another reason, though, and this is something you do not see Dick Uihlein do or Miriam Adelson do or Reid Hoffman do or any other kind of billionaire, is sometimes you think Elon Musk is the candidate.
Yes.
He came out to a song I've heard at plenty of Trump rallies. You can see right now on the screen, he was standing in front of this massive American flag at the town hall. He was weighing in on tons of topics that he would go over 10 minutes at a time without talking about Donald Trump. It's like, Elon, what do you think about AI? Elon, what do you think about Neuralink? It almost reminds me of a book author doing a talk, which is fine. But I was baffled why this event was happening. And Elon was clearly entertained. He had to deal with unruly, activists, and he was doing all the politician stuff. Who does a town hall in New Hampshire?